The boy had just learned to wield a sword during the family ritual, and immediately pointed the sword at his own brother. It turns out that it was this very ritual in my past life that forced me to become my brother's shadow. All the abilities I gained thereafter were unconditionally given to him, and all the pain he suffered was borne by me. All because I was a despised illegitimate child. To change my fate of being ruthlessly humiliated, I trained like mad every day, 365 days a year, never slacking off. To gain recognition and complete my mission, I volunteered to fight for the family. Finally, through countless life or death battles, I brought the final victory to the family in war. I thought I would be rewarded with the family's highest honor, but instead I was accused of treason by my brother, and forced to face the truth that as a shadow I could only give unconditionally. So in the final moment of my life, I swung my sword in rage one last time, but as a shadow, the strike led to my own demise. However, when I opened my eyes again, I found that I had been reborn back to the age of 3. Before I could even understand what was happening, cold splash of water suddenly hit me. I looked up, and saw a fat woman glaring at me fiercely. "Get yourself cleaned up quickly. Someone will take you somewhere soon." But when she saw my innocent face, she looked at me with a rebellious expression. The woman immediately slapped me across the face. "You little brat, still not grown up. You've really got some nerve." Slap knocked me to the ground. But when I turned to look at the reflection in the water, I was shocked. But then I couldn't help but feel ecstatic. I couldn't believe I had really been reborn, and at that time I hadn't become the shadow yet. Recalling the betrayal and humiliation I suffered in my past life, I swore that in this life I would make him pay 1,000 times over. But then the growl from my stomach reminded me that this body hadn't eaten for almost 3 days. I looked at the little mouse, my only companion, and grinned wickedly. But just as I was about to eat the mouse to fill my stomach, 2 guards suddenly entered the room. "You little pest, Master Allen wants to see you." Without saying another word, they dragged me out. It was then that I suddenly remembered that in my past life I was chosen today to become a shadow. I was bound by a blood oath spell to carry the shadow's vow for life. Not only were all my abilities unconditionally given to the Oath Master, but I also had to endure all the pain the Master suffered. But this time I would not just accept it. I immediately bit the guard's hand. As he winced in pain, I quickly broke free from their hold. Dodging a punch from one of them, I swiftly drew the guard's sword. With a flash of dazzling light, the guard's right ear was sliced off in an instant. Looking at the blade's cold gleam, I couldn't help but wear a sinister smile. Today is the perfect opportunity for my revenge. Soon all the chosen ones were gathered in the family's secret chamber. But Alan angrily slapped one of the guards. "Alan Cooper, 8 years old, heir of the Cooper family. Are you worthless fools raised on nothing but air? You can't even handle a stray dog, how pathetic." He walked over to me with an annoyed look. Then with a sinister glare he threatened, "How dare you touch my people? Lock this little bastard in the dungeon." But just then a voice interrupted Alan. It was Alan's mother, Hera Cooper. She told Alan, "The child has always been a wild, untrained stray. His behavior is a little wild, that's normal. And don't forget what your mother told you. Today our main task is to complete the swearing ceremony." Although Alan didn't understand why his mother chose this lowly illegitimate child as the shadow, he silently vowed in his heart, "If I get the chance, I will personally destroy him." Then to prevent anyone from disturbing her son, Hera ordered everyone to leave. Only Alan and his shadow remained in the room. Then Alan poured poisoned wine for each chosen shadow. He led the others in swearing allegiance to the family with their lives. Soon after the oaths were taken, everyone drank the poisoned wine. Looking at the children collapsing from the poison, Alan grinned with satisfaction. A bunch of fools who can't even tell the difference between a secret elixir and holy water. With that he cut his finger and began casting the blood magic. As the blood dropped to the ground, a blood-red magic circle instantly appeared. Countless purple vines began to wrap around the unconscious shadows. Alan was delighted to feel waves of energy flowing into his body. He couldn't believe how simple the shadow's vow was. But just as he turned to share the good news with his mother, a heavy blow suddenly struck his leg. Alan fell to the ground, his face filled with terror. Just as he was about to call out for his mother, he suddenly heard my voice from behind. I was grinning as I told him, "Your mother, in order to not disturb your shadow's vow, has already placed a soundproof spell here." Hearing this, Alan's face showed utter despair. He couldn't believe I was still conscious and even knew about the shadow's vow. But I smiled wickedly and replied, "If I can reverse the shadow's vow, what will you do about it?" With that, I drove my sword deep into the magic circle. Feeling the sharp pain in my heart, Alan demanded to know what I was trying to do. But recalling how I was killed by the backlash in my past life, I grinned maliciously and said, "I'm just repaying a debt." Meanwhile, at the door of the secret room, Hera Cooper, sensing that the shadow's vow had been broken, was immediately filled with shock. However, the butler reassured her, "Master Alan's body is unharmed. He simply lost consciousness from using too much magic power." Seeing Alan looking uneasy, Hera was about to comfort him, telling him not to worry about the shadows. After all, this is a world where the strong prey on the weak. But before she could say anything more, Alan suddenly frowned. I am the future head of the Cooper family. These bastards were born to serve me. How could I possibly care about them? Hearing this, Hera looked pleased. That's my son, you're thinking just as you should. Whatever reward you want, just tell me. However, hearing the commotion in the room, I couldn't help but smile. I bet no one expected that the Shadow's vow ceremony had already been reversed, switching the relationship between Alan and me. From now on, Alan Cooper will be my shadow. But even so, I am still too weak at the age of 3. I'm simply not strong enough to fight back. I must begin to grow stronger from now on. And the first step to getting stronger is the Fire Seed Cliff. This is a place specifically designed as a test for shadows who sacrifice themselves for the family. Just like Prometheus, who willingly sacrificed himself, the Cooper family will throw children under 10 years old onto the Fire Seed Cliff. They are then ordered to crawl through thorns, while eagles tear at their flesh. Even if they're on the verge of death, they cannot give up until the first shadow reaches the top. That person will receive the blessing of the griffin. Their body will be invulnerable to any attack. Then, with the order from the shadow instructor, all the chosen shadows rushed toward the Fire Seed Cliff. Only I remained calm and unhurried. This immediately drew the attention of the instructor, seeing that I wasn't following the others up the slope, but instead trying to climb the cliff with my bare hands. The 2 instructors burst into laughter. How foolish. Probably won't even make it halfway up before falling to his death. Why don't we go help him out now? However, one of the instructors stopped them. I just thought of something interesting. It's about time that thing comes out. As soon as the words left his mouth, a giant figure suddenly flew out from above the Fire Seed Cliff. Seeing this terrifying sight, everyone's face turned pale with fear. Meanwhile, I had just reached the cliff, and I saw the griffin eating the shadows' bodies below. At the same time, the instructor at the base of the cliff drew his bow and arrow. He had offended Master Alan yesterday. He thought he could take advantage of the griffin to deal with this kid. It would also please the young master. With that, he released an arrow. The griffin immediately noticed me just as I had reached the cliff. In the next moment, it pounced at me with incredible speed. Unknowingly, this played into my hands. Only I, with my past life's experience, knew that the only way to reach the top quickly and receive the griffin's blessing was to tame it. Danger level 4 stars, birthplace Fire Seed Mountain. But I knew if I didn't defeat it completely, I could never tame it. But given my current size and weight, before I even got close, it would swat me away. So the only option now was to reach the cave at the top. So while the griffin launched another windstorm attack, I waited for the perfect moment to use my sword to block it. Using the wind force, I successfully reached the cave. To replenish the energy I had spent, I activated the Shadow's vow to draw some power from Alan. Meanwhile, back at the family, Alan, who had just regained consciousness, fell unconscious again. Using his power, I successfully jumped into the cave. Since Griffin hadn't caught up yet, I quickly ran deeper into the cave. Soon Griffin caught up with me at a very fast pace. But just as it was about to attack, it immediately stopped in its tracks. It turned out that I had grabbed Griffin's cub. What no one knew was that, despite Griffin's power, its cub couldn't fly due to having crippled wings. Facing the now aware giant eagle, I assured it that I wouldn't harm its cub. In fact, I could heal its wings so it could fly. However, I had a condition. Meanwhile, the 2 instructors at the base of the mountain heard that I had fallen silent. They assumed I had been eaten by Griffin. Just as they were about to return to ask for rewards from Master Alan, they suddenly heard my voice from behind. When they turned around in confusion, they saw me riding on top of Griffin. Then, with a light swing of Griffin's wing, the 2 instructors were instantly knocked out. Griffin then looked at me and said, "I've kept my promise to you. Now it's time for you to fulfill your promise to me." Then, following my guidance, Griffin and I arrived at the northernmost part of the mountain range, a secret place called the Stone Realm. As per our agreement, once I obtained the Perseus sword, I would help Griffin obtain Medusa's blood to heal everything. However, what Griffin didn't know was that my real goal was to use his power to destroy this secret realm. Then, with Griffin's immense strength, the Stone Realm's gates crashed open. A Medusa statue with a human body and serpent tail appeared before us. It turned out that in my past life at the age of 12, the matron Hera sent the Shadow Legion to retrieve the holy sword for Alan. But because the secret realm contained a Medusa statue that could turn all living things into stone, the Shadow Legion suffered heavy casualties. I was the only one who survived. However, the Perseus sword only accepts people with S-class talents, and at that time I couldn't even lift it. But Alan easily picked up the holy sword and killed Medusa. He became the genius chosen by the holy sword. He gained countless resources, connections, and loyal subordinates. So even if I don't get the holy sword's recognition in this life, I will never let Alan have it. Meanwhile, Griffin was puzzled as to why there were only broken stones in the secret realm. But the next moment the stone realm's gates suddenly slammed shut. Then the statues around Medusa began to attack Griffin. However, facing the mighty Griffin, these statues were no match for him. But in the next moment the shattered statues suddenly reformed. It gradually merged into a statue of the sea god. With a raised hand, countless waves of water surged toward us. Griffin anxiously asked me, "If this continues the place will collapse. We might all die here." But hearing this I secretly rejoiced. That would be perfect. If the secret realm collapses everything will be buried. Then I can escape through the secret passage I found in my past life. But the current power wasn't enough. So I pointed to the ceiling and told Griffin, "Once you remove the eye from the stone wall, it will stop attacking." Without hesitation Griffin removed the eyeball from the ceiling. Sure enough, in the next second the sea god statue began to dissolve. In no time it turned into a pool of stagnant water. But just as Griffin breathed a sigh of relief and asked where the holy sword was, I pointed to a nearby spot and told him, "Perseus used this sword to decapitate Medusa." Then red and green blood flowed from the statue. The red blood can kill all living things, while the green blood can heal any injury. But there's another secret that no one knows. When the Perseus sword appears, it's the day Medusa is resurrected. As soon as I finished speaking, the still Medusa statue suddenly moved. It attacked Griffin, and that was my ultimate goal. To use the powers of Medusa and Griffin to completely destroy the secret realm. But just as I was about to escape through the secret passage, the Medusa statue suddenly struck me. Though the strike missed, it completely destroyed the secret passage behind me. But when I turned around, unbeknownst to me Griffin had already hidden using his shrinking ability. Fortunately I had already gone through the secret realm in my past life. So I wasn't completely helpless. I immediately ran to grab the Round Table Knight's shield. This special shield not only reflected Medusa's attacks preventing me from turning to stone, but it could also block her gaze-based attacks. However, with just a shield I was no match for Medusa. I was thrown out in less than 2.5 seconds. But now with the secret passage destroyed, and with my talent I still couldn't wield the Perseus sword. But at this life or death moment, I decided to take a gamble and try again. However, what I never expected was that in this life I easily lifted the Perseus sword. But just as I stood there stunned, Medusa behind me pierced me with a cold strike. At that moment I suddenly remembered that I couldn't lift the holy sword because of my low talent. But because in my past life the Shadow's vow had caused Alan's mother to cruelly strip me of my S-class talent. She then erased this memory with amnesia magic. Recalling all of this I was instantly filled with rage. Powerful aura erupted from me in an instant. Griffin witnessing this scene was immediately shocked. This kid managed to break free unscathed. And he suddenly became so strong. He's like a monster. Meanwhile, as I swung the Perseus sword in my hand, the once invincible Medusa was instantly slain by me. As the statue's head fell, I used the bottle of green blood to treat Griffin's cub, thinking about the memory that Alan and his mother had erased from my past life. I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed things were getting more interesting. As for Alan and the family, you all better wait for me. At this moment, seeing my crazy expression, Griffin tried to sneak away, but I called him back immediately. When I asked if he was thick-headed, Griffin looked at me in confusion. In just 1 second he understood my intentions. He then charged forward with me smashing through the wall and out of the secret realm. At this point Griffin understood that this kid had probably planned to use me to destroy the secret realm from the start. But seeing that I had only helped his cub he let it go. Afterwards we returned to the fire seed cliff. Griffin began to bless me. In the name of the divine eagle Griffin, I bless you with a body that cannot be harmed no matter how much you are bitten or pecked. As his words fell, a golden magic circle appeared beneath my feet. I immediately felt my body become much stronger. Minor injuries began to heal on their own. Next I handed Griffin the green blood. After Griffin drank it down in one go, its broken wings instantly healed. Then it eagerly soared into the sky. Griffin watched the scene happily, but I told him not to get too proud. If it doesn't recognize its master before it matures, it will just be a little stupid bird. Hearing this Griffin fell into deep thought. He had also gained his intelligence by being fed human brains by his master. That's how his intelligence grew stronger. But his master had been dead for over 100 years. Where could he find a strong decisive master like him? But looking at the boy in front of him holding the Perseus sword, Griffin immediately realized, this kid despite his young age had means far beyond his peers. He might even surpass Blade in the future. So Griffin requested that I take his cub as my magical pet. Hearing that the fish had finally taken the bait, he couldn't help but smile proudly. I could accept it as my magical pet. But you need to make a deal with me. I need all the information you have on Blade Cooper, and the precious key that opens the Cooper family's treasure vault. Meanwhile inside the Cooper family castle, Alan had fainted several times without any explanation. This made Hera extremely angry. So those little shadows took the damage for him. Alan always recovered quickly, but Hera felt something was off about this. It seemed that ever since the Shadow's vow ceremony Alan had been like this. Someone must be interfering. Just then the butler told her. Sar Cooper as expected took first place in the trials. But he didn't just kill the Shadow training officers using Griffin. He also tamed Griffin's cub as his magical pet. Upon hearing this Hera was instantly shocked. She immediately ordered for me to be brought in. She questioned me. Why did you kill the training officer's Uncle Walker and his nephew? But I with a mocking smile replied. I did it all for the family. The prestigious Shadow training officers. To think that 2 Shadow training officers were killed by a 3-year-old child like me. The Cooper family doesn't need such trash. And besides, madam, you wouldn't want others to look down on the Cooper family, would you? Hearing this, Hera's face twisted in disgust. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dark satisfaction. Because right now she wouldn't do anything to me. Sure enough, the next second Hera had the butler take me to Eden Spring for treatment. However, as I was leaving the hall, Hera's expression immediately darkened. She ordered the butler to speed up the research on stripping away magic. It must be done before the Sword Spirit inheritance ceremony. Strip Sal's talent and give it to my son. Otherwise, if Alan's lack of talent is exposed, his position as heir will be lost. Meanwhile at Eden Spring, looking at the spring before me, I fell into deep thought. I recalled Griffin's words. His master had used forbidden techniques before dying, sealing his soul at the bottom of Eden Spring. The goal was to pass down his lifetime swordsmanship to a descendant with S-class swordsmanship talent, to ensure that the Cooper family would stand strong in the Empire. I just needed to enter the spring and follow the underground current into the cave. This key would guide me to the Sword Spirit. However, Eden Spring seemed to have another mystery, and Griffin wasn't fully aware of it. It seems that obtaining the swordsmanship inheritance before Alan won't be an easy task. But just then, a harsh voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts. It was the stable master's son Rainer and his lackey Lucian. They sneered as they walked up to me. Congratulations. I never thought the son of a scrawny whore like you would be the first to reach the top of the mountain. Looking at the 2 barking idiots before me, I suddenly recalled how they became my subordinates under Alan's orders in my past life. Then they fabricated false charges accusing me of treason. However, seeing me remain silent, Rainer the toothless fool threw a punch at me. I want to see if your blessed body is of any use. Unfortunately, his attack was full of openings in my eyes. I instantly kicked him in the crotch. Lucian, seeing this, immediately pulled out a dagger and attacked me. But he soon showed a face of terror, because in that instant, I quickly placed Rainer in front of me. Then in Lucian's shocked gaze, I kicked both of them straight into Eden Spring. Let them test the secret of the spring for me. Sure enough, Rainer, who was injured, was immediately enveloped in dark magic the moment he came into contact with the spring. As I was thinking about how to enter the spring without getting wet, a familiar voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts. I saw a guard dragging a little girl. Seeing that the girl dared to talk back, the guard immediately swung his fist to strike her. But the next second, with a flash of blood, the guard was instantly cut in half by my sword. It turned out the girl was named Andrea. She was not only my closest friend in my past life, but also possessed incredible magical talent. We had fought side by side for some time. Andrea had once expressed her feelings for me, but seeing her stunned expression now, I couldn't help but wonder if I had scared her. She then asked me my name. Looking at the cute little girl before me, I couldn't help but blush. I didn't expect 5-year-old Andrea to be so adorable. After telling her my name was Sal, I quickly returned to the matter at hand and asked, "Do you know how we can drain the spring? Or enter the spring without getting wet?" Andrea looked at me with a puzzled expression. It turned out she had already noticed that although the strange magic in Eden Spring could heal injuries, after that only the spring water could heal wounds, and no other healing magic would work. Hearing this, I immediately understood. It seems this is the Cooper family's way of controlling the shadows, forcing them to endure pain while only being able to rely on the family. But what Andrea did next made me feel a sense of joy. She used her magic to cast the duck magic. This would allow us to be separated from the water like ducks. Just then, the family guards who had received the news hurried over, so I had no choice but to grab Andrea and jump into the spring. We quickly reached the spring source following the current. Although Andrea waved her hand signaling that it was dangerous, the powerful pull of the current didn't give us time to think. When I opened my eyes again, I saw that we were already in a cave. I immediately took out the key Griffin had given me, but there was no reaction from the surroundings. At this moment, Andrea asked me to give her the key. Sure enough, as Andrea cast a summoning spell on the key, a golden magic circle began to form on the ground. However, just then, man-eating flower in the cave suddenly awoke and attacked us. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and saved Andrea. Meanwhile, a portal appeared in the middle of the man-eating flower's body. But by this time Andrea had already passed out. I had no choice but to place her in a corner of the cave. I then used the invisibility magic she taught me to stay hidden. I remembered the upcoming battle. With firm steps I approached the entrance. Even though I had mentally prepared, seeing the sea of blood before me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Meanwhile, the sword demons on the pile of bodies saw me approach, and immediately displayed excited expressions. It turns out that while Eden Spring is advertised as a medicinal hot spring, it is actually a place where the Cooper family houses concubines, and those concubines eventually become the sword demon's nourishment. Just as I was lost in thought, the sword demon swiftly approached me mocking. To think I sense an S-class talent, I immediately pulled back and asked, "Could you be Alan Cooper, the rumored little brat born with S-class talent? But you don't look like someone raised in luxury. Or are you just a bastard here for the inheritance?" I didn't expect this monster to guess my identity so quickly. But it doesn't matter, because my goal this time is to kill you. The sword demon couldn't help but burst into laughter. Such arrogance at such a young age. No wonder you're a descendant of Blade Cooper. But as the words fell, what awaited me was the sword demon's ruthless and fierce attack. Seeing me knocked down, the sword demon smirked. "You're still too weak." But just as he spoke, the sword demon suddenly noticed the blessing of the divine eagle on me. "I didn't expect you to have that silly bird's approval." Taking advantage of the sword demon's brief distraction, I unleashed the magic sealing blood formation at lightning speed. It turns out that during the 100 years after Blade's death, the Empire had already developed secret techniques to counter blood magic, and now all I need to do is take the blood demon's heart, and I can gain Blade's swordsmanship inheritance. However, just when I thought I was about to succeed, the sword demon suddenly let out a mocking laugh. My holy sword froze in that instant. It turns out that what had just happened was simply the sword demon's trick to fool me. Seeing my surprised expression, the sword demon immediately burst into laughter. "I haven't played with a little mouse in a long time. Well, the game's over, it's time for you to die. I admit you do have some talent, but it's still not enough to inherit from me." As the sword demon finished speaking, a mass of blood puppets suddenly surged from the ground. They immediately launched an attack on me like a tidal wave. Facing such a dense attack, I immediately used the defense magic of the Perseus sword. In an instant a golden shield appeared around me. But what I didn't expect was that this life-saving move I had relied on was so easily broken by the sword demon. The moment the shield was shattered, the sword demon grabbed me by the throat and lifted me up. At this moment I could feel my blood and magic power slowly draining away. However, just as I was about to lose consciousness, I suddenly heard the sword demon's voice. "Why does your breath feel so familiar? It's like someone I've eaten before, a concubine. Could that person be your mother?" These words deeply struck my heart. Recalling the past, I had once lived in my mother's cradle. But one day suddenly, my mother abandoned me, and I became a target for others to bully at will. It was this buried memory in my heart that suddenly erupted into a strong will at the moment of my death. In order to kill the sword demon, I burned my vital blood at the cost of my life. I did this to unleash the greatest power of the Perseus sword. Sure enough, even the once invincible sword demon was heavily injured by my life-risking blow. He hurriedly tried to escape and feed on a few women to regain strength. However, I had already fallen into a state of madness. Before the sword demon could react, I pierced him with my sword and killed him. But with the sword demon's fall, the memory of my mother vanished from my mind. Since I could remember, I had no mother. Everything that happened earlier was just an illusion before my death. Meanwhile, the sword demon's body turned into a sword pellet. By absorbing it, I could gain Blade's swordsmanship inheritance. At this moment I felt no joy. However, just then, I suddenly heard Andrea's voice behind me. Seeing me covered in blood, she hurriedly cast a healing spell on me. Looking at Andrea's expression of exhaustion, I couldn't help but recall the past. In my previous life, Andrea's final fate was to become a concubine and be devoured by the sword demon. So as she looked at me in confusion, I immediately pulled her tightly into my arms and vowed, "This time, I will never let the tragedy repeat." With the sword demon gone, internal disputes erupted within the family, and the servants, having witnessed Sal's ruthlessness, no longer dared to bully Andrea. Sal was blamed in the rumors as the culprit behind the disappearance of the sword spirit. Imprisonment, blood extraction, poisoning. But with no evidence, the madam could only intensify the persecution. But whether it was imprisonment, blood extraction, or poisoning, Sal endured the repeated persecution without a scratch. In the blink of an eye, 4 years passed. At the Cooper family's training grounds, Alan casually defeated a servant with a single strike.